Yes, good afternoon everybody on Ars Electronica. I'm Christophe de Jager. I work for the Center for Fine Arts for BOZAR Lab. We're welcoming you today in the Salle Bertouille, which is a very small space in our center to have a discussion on Studiotopia. Next to me, I have two scientists and two artists, and we're going to take you into a discussion on collaboration on art, science, and technology this afternoon. I would like to give you a small overview on Studiotopia. It's a European research project that we have founded with 8 international partners. This is the Onassis Foundation in Athens, Lasnia Center for Contemporary Art in Poland, the Cultural Center of Cluj in Romania, of course Ars Electronica, also the Center for Fine Arts, Gluon and Laborel. It was the outcome of a long research into how residencies are taking place in the States as well as in Europe. And we came to the conclusion that if we talk about residencies for artists, it were mostly artists who went into the research facilities of universities or in the R&D departments of companies. I give one example. It's the residency program Experiments in Art and Technology that was founded by Billy Kluver in the 60s in the States. You had artists going to the Bell Labs to work together with engineers. Mostly the outcome were works of art that were then presented in festivals or in exhibition events, such as in the Armory show. We thought that this was very interesting. We have in Europe a similar program today, which is called START, Science, Technology and Art. You can find more information on the general site, start.eu. This is also a program where they send artists to companies because they believe that the collaboration with artists leads to more humane technologies and also progress in the end, which is much more than innovation. But Studiotopia is a reversal model. So we give artists, 13 artists in this case, the opportunity to invite scientists into their studio. I think artists are critical antennae of our society, and they are big communicators also towards the public. But in order to have an objective view and a critical view on the latest developments in science and technology, they have to be able to understand it. And this is what happens with discussions with high professionals in the studios. I also think Studiotopia is really interesting for the scientists because we bring them out of their environment, out of the labs, and we confront them with alternative views on the world. In a moment where our world is confronted with extremely big challenges, going from climate, going to our economical models, going to our health with the COVID, I think it is necessary that people from different fields come together, be it philosophers, ethicists, artists, engineers, researchers, and that we try to build another worldview for tomorrow, or that we together repair the future. We have organized one film for all of you that will take around 70 minutes, and you will see how both artists Kwang Yi and Sandra Lorenzi take the bus from BOZAR to the Research Institute for Life Sciences and Biotech in Ghent, where they meet different researchers in their labs or in the fields where they were working. It was the first confrontation between the scientists and the artists, and on the basis of this first meeting, Sandra and Kwang Yi will invite the researchers to their studios to start to have further communications on very essential topics. So I invite you all on our journey to Ghent, and we see all of you back in 70 minutes.
Hello, we are at the Center for Fine Arts in Brussels, Belgium, capital of Europe, in this empty space of BOZAR, the Sculpture Hall, where we try to recover of a global crisis. And In the frame of Studiotopia, we try to bring together the art and science community. BOZAR has a mission since 100 years. It's not an interdisciplinary approach, but intersectoral approach between art and science, but also with the political and the economic community. There is a sense of urgency. We need to act. We need to have also a critical approach to the political vision to solve this problem and to come with new utopias for the future. And so the art and science community can really bring some ideas and a form of salvation. And that's really the project where as BOZAR, as a partner, we are involved in these reflections and project.
So welcome everybody to the Studiotopia program. This is a scientist in residency program that has been launched by BOZAR and a couple of international partners. And its goal is to invite scientists into the studio of artists. We have been launching this program together with Onassis and Ars Electronica before the outbreak of the COVID crisis. And I think that in the light of what's happening today, the different ecological, institutional, or even economical crises that we are facing, it's really important that artists have the opportunity to invite scientists into their studio to discuss these problems. Today we are going to take all of you on a journey to the Institution for Biotechnology in Ghent, where they work a lot on genetics. And this is something that Kwang Yi and Sandra Lorenzi, both of the artists, are really interested in. And together with the scientists, you will see how they discuss the future relations or the contemporary relations between the natural environment, between humans and the technology we create. Because it's in this balance that we will have to define the present or the future. So I think this is a good start for the discussions, and I would like to invite all of you to go now on a journey to Ghent together with both of the artists. Thank you.
Then you put it under your shirt. Where's your BOZAR? Like this goes under your shirt and it goes up here. Can you talk once?
Is it okay?
Wait, I just check. Yeah, one more time.
The sound is okay or not?
Yeah, the sound is. Yeah, okay. Can you talk once?
Yeah. Can you hear the sound of music?
Do we also test when we talk without the mask? Do we need?
Yeah, maybe we can listen to you without mask.
Is it
Alors, est-ce
different?
que ça marche?
Oui, ça marche mieux. Hein.
Ça marche mieux, hein? Bah ouais. But they always wait for the reaction of the artist about science. But I would like to have the reaction about the scientist about art. No?
Because it's also interesting.
Yeah. They listen music, they see movies, they read books, so they are connected to a kind of imaginaries or unconscious or subconscious, I don't know. And
si possible, faites demi-tour.
on arrive?
Ouais.
Oh.
Là, il y a des... Oui, c'est juste... Enfin,
Ah, c'est ça?
je sais pas. Si possible, faites demi-tour.
And we are making a film together with the crew that will last for 10 minutes. And the goal of this film is that the people that are in the virtual world, they get an introduction to the jobs that you are doing, and that we bring them here to the landscape and that you explain what you do. It would be nice if you go to the fields and we can follow you, because this is what the digital people also will do. It's we bring them to a virtual garden. So we follow, you can go and...
So where we are here is we are in a field not far from the city of Ghent, and what you see here is actually a field of soybean plants. And here you see the beans, and these, so you see the pods actually, not the beans, and then the beans are in the pods, and these beans are full of protein, and these beans are actually a very good alternative for animal proteins. The problem is that soybean is an Asian plant, so it's actually not adapted to grow here. So what you see here is a field from the Institute Ilvo, And Ilvo is actually trying to make soybean plants that are adapted to grow here in our short summer cycle.
It's like a plant immigrant.
Yeah, because this is an immigrant,
Yeah.
right? And so there are researchers trying to make the immigrant adapted.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what you see here on that
Yeah,
field.
yeah.
And what we try to do is to find a bacterium that also can do the job with
Yeah.
the immigrants.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, voilà.
Oh.
So here we have the plants. You see all the pots with, and there are all the beans, and these beans are then used for all kinds of products. Now this is now the root of the soybean. And do you see all these little nodules? So
Yeah.
these are nodules, they're kind of little organs. And if you open these nodules, you see? What? You see it's a bit red? So we now look inside this little organ. So what happens is that the bacteria and the plant, they start to communicate with each other. And the plants are actually making a new house where the bacteria can live in and do the job for the plants. And inside these organs, the bacteria find the perfect environment to change nitrogen gas into ammonia. And this ammonia goes directly to the plants. It's the nitrogen source, and the plant uses it to make the beans.
I did a project. It's called Millennium Ginseng Project. It's about ginseng. It's a kind of plant which is used in traditional Chinese medicine, and the roots of the plant look like a human body. So we believe in eating the roots is good for our health. However, the problem is they are genetically endangered in North America because there are a lot of illegal harvesting the wild ginseng and sell it to Asian markets.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the ecological problem. So my project is trying to grow ginseng in a farm, but with a lot of different extreme environment to torture ginseng. Yeah. So a bit similar like your research, like adapting a plant to a new environment, but we are trying to to mimic the natural environment to ginseng and train it, because in the culture belief system in Asia, we believe in the ginseng take the qi from the nature, and we eat it, and we can take the qi as well. So if we can provide it with a greenhouse with a lot of extreme environment, maybe we can create artificial wild. So in
artificial wild,
yeah.
That's a nice
so
word.
use artificial wild to save the real wild.
The real wild.
So VIB is a strategic research institute working together with, I would say, top experts. So we have the luxury in 25 years' time to have built up out an ecosystem for research in life sciences at large. And I think we have the key opinion leaders in a lot of domains in biotechnology within our institute. And the mission of VIB is to perform basic research, top research, but also to translate it to the community. So we have a lot of experience also in science communication, and with the Grand Challenges program that I'm managing, that's another layer we add to the institute, and we actually want to increase the societal impact and the societal footprint of the research that we are performing. In a nutshell.
Sandra Lorenzi.
Here you are.
So what we are doing here is our work is related to the blood-brain barrier. If you look to our brain, it is a very sensitive organ, and there's a need for this barrier to be present, because it would be dangerous, of course, if everything inside our blood can just reach the brain. Yeah. So this barrier is very important. And what we are interested in is what happens to this barrier in disease conditions, because if it's open, then it's dangerous for the brain. And we are also very much interested in getting therapeutics into the brain, because since you have this barrier, it's not only blocking dangerous molecules, but also molecules that you want to get into the brain for example, a therapy. What we are trying to do is looking at the natural mechanisms that occur, because of course, while dangerous molecules should not enter the brain, the brain needs nutrients and specific molecules. So there are mechanisms that really are present at this barrier, and what happens is these molecules take something from the blood, a nutrient for example, transport it across this barrier and then deliver it to the brain. And we really want to hijack these mechanisms, and use it as a way to get these therapeutics into the brain.
So I used to work with more science, human sciences, anthropology, archaeology, but not science like that, very appliqué. Me, you have to know that I have a philosophical parcours. I make philosophical studies, and I have 3 approaches in my work: transhistorical, energetic. So I practice with the stone, lithotherapy. So I'm interested about the question of the life, in the inert, the difference on the inert and the life. After all, I have a fictional work, so I write poetry, like stories, and in my stories you can find all the elements of the world, human beings, animals, stones, who speak together to recreate a kind of environment where everything is in connection, in a relation. Me, I'm...
in the brain, if you look to the brain, everything is connected. There are so many cells there, and they interconnect.
It's the reason that I'm very interested about this question. And when you talk about war, I make a project, the name is Prospective des murs, it's prospective of the walls. But very literally, with building walls with stones. And, but the metaphor of the stone, of the walls, is very interesting because a wall is always ambivalent symbol. You know, it protects, but it separates.
It's a bit the same for the therapeutics.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm wondering, like, when you received the invitation to have the video shooting, it's an art-science collaboration program, that's it. How do you see the art-science collaboration, and what kind of things are you imagining, these kind of things, and what's your expectation from these things?
What I imagine? Okay. Well, the reason why I think it's an interesting point of view, because as I told you already, we both use our creativity to create things, to analyze things, to view things. So I think I will get a new viewpoint from you. So the whole idea you just mentioned about the immigrant plant, I mean, it's a perfect, example case, because it's true what you say, it's really true what you say. So it's actually this kind of interaction I really like. It's my curiosity that drives me being here and talk to you, definitely,
The core value of scientific research for me is actually really similar with artistic practice, because it's just explore the nature and find the beauty of the nature, and it's very pure.
Might be easier or faster at least.
So we have the electron microscopes. And those are very specialized, and everything is in black and white, because it's about electrons and how dense the tissue is. And the denser the tissue, the more black signal you get. So that's why you have this black and white. But if you want this type of images, you need fluorescent molecules. This is, for example, brain tissue. And then these in blue are these nuclei where the DNA is present. So as I showed in the electron microscopy image, so it's less detail, of course. And so that's what we here try to do, to see how we can get molecules from this side, so from the blood side, into the black, and that's the brain ventricles. I still remember, especially with the electron microscopy, the first time that I looked at this choroid plexus. It was so
amazing.
You see so many things at once. While with the normal microscope, you see the nucleus, but there you can really look inside the nucleus, see the DNA even. So that's really fascinating.
Also, the thing interesting, it's the different scale of representation. The different scale of representation, but also the different scale of just things, you know, to be in the cellular dimension and also in the body dimension. That's crazy. And I would like to if it's possible, to take measure the vibration of the cell. You know?
No, explain. and I mean, a cell is very, very, very small.
But
so
I think it's possible. I'm sure it's possible. It's my intuition.
Problem is, of course, that as I mentioned, the cells have to be in a very confined environment to be healthy and not to die.
Yeah, sure.
Because they easily die, of course, if they don't have the right nutrients, if they don't have the right oxygen.
Sure. But it would be awesome to make that. I don't know. I just have.
And how can you get close to the cell?
With your help.
Before we see plant or other organism, we don't see their culture. So I think from now we should see the culture of organism, because before we see only human has culture, but from my perspective, every organism have their own culture, and we should respect them. Yeah.
And it's not because we don't know that it's not existing.
Yeah.
That's a very important thing.
Yeah. They have their wisdom.
They also have their wisdom, exactly.
And scientific research can help us to understand their wisdom.
And they're usually much more clever than we are.
Yeah, I think plants definitely are smarter than us.
So, welcome back in Brussels. Hope you enjoyed the film. You saw the researchers and artists visiting the Research Institute of Life Sciences and Biotech. Now I would like to shortly introduce our 4 participants of this evening. And I would like to start with Sandra.
Hello everyone. Hello. I present my work.
If you,
I can say a few words in my artistic work. When I start to work on a project, I used to collect testimonies to discover the territories. It's very important for me to feel situate on a place, not to be not in the ground. I have to feel the ground. So. From this material, from this collected material, I create, as I said in the movie, writing, poetry, drawing, sculptures, big installation, where everything is in correlation. They became a kind of ecosystem, which means that one element could have several natures. For example, a fragment of coal talks about mining past, industrial past too, but also it talks about our relationship between the underground, between our philosopher's stone. So, for example, in the same project, we can have the theme of alchemy and the theme of industry together. So this is my method to connect was not yet connected through artistic and philosophical issues. I think the work of art is human expression and the fulfillment of this expression through the work of the artist. And my job is to take care of that expression. Here we can join the work of science through this notion of take care. So my residency approaches place the notion of care at the center of his concern.
Thank you, Sandra. It will definitely interest Jean-Christophe, who is also an arts lover, visits lots of museums, What are you doing here?
Yes, so yes, I'm here because of many reasons. So I like art and I like creativity. I am fascinated by the work of your work and some of the work of your colleagues. But I'm a scientist, so I guess that's why I'm here. I'm a cancer biologist. We study cancer from many different angles. More recently, we have been able to use new technologies to really dive into tumors and study how individual tumor cells behave. And we try to use those technologies to improve diagnostics, so to detect the disease early as possible, as well as to improve treatments. And another important goal in our research is try to also minimize the side effects of treatments to patients. So we study cancer from a very fundamental point of view, but we keep the patient at the center of our interest.
And this immunotherapy is something very new,
Yes, so one of the therapies that we're focusing on is obviously immunotherapy. It's a recent approach that has been a concept that has been invented many years ago, but that came to realization only recently with a specific drug that allows the immune system to recognize the cancer cells. So one of the things that cancer cells are very good at is to hide from the immune system, and there is now a molecule that allows to revert this principle, and so tumor cells now are recognized by the immune system when we treat these patients with this particular drug. There are two problems with that. One is that these drugs have important side effects, which we try to minimize. And the second problem is that, and we don't really know why, but some patients do respond really well while others do not. And this is one of the goals of the project, actually, that we are involved in at the moment, is to try to find ways to discriminate beforehand patients that would respond to the treatment versus patients that would not respond to the treatment. In other words, not to give the therapy to patients that will not respond to avoid suffering and consequences. Yeah.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. We go deeper into this. Kwang Yi, you're not only artist, you're also a scientist. Tell us something about this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kwang Yi. I'm from Taiwan, but recently I'm based in the Netherlands. And now I'm an artist, but before being an artist, I had been working as a dentist for a couple of years. So I graduated from dental school, but now I'm an artist. So as you know, most of my work are related to medical technology, and especially I'm interested in that how medicine can affect the future society, especially the emerging medical technology, because several of these kind of medicine has a certain kind of culture issue or ethical issue, and if we can combine art, practice and design methodology and also scientific research is what I'm doing, and I think it's possible to illustrate a speculative scenario that can engage general public and have the communication tool to have the reaction from the public and then have the feedback back to science itself. So I think this kind of collaboration between art and science is very valuable for me as an artist and scientist at the same time, because I think it's not only can have the artistic value, but also can have the very important value for scientific field as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Kwang Yi. Kathleen.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Kathleen. I'm working in the IBD Leuven research group. And we are doing both translational and clinical research on inflammatory bowel diseases. These diseases, the name is saying it, these patients have inflammation in the intestines. And the disease is already set in young patients, often from between 15 and 25 years. And it's a chronic disease, so these patients have the disease for life. But we still do not know what is the cause of the disease. And in our lab, we are doing research to get more insights in the pathogenesis of this disease. And we are also looking whether we can improve the current therapies. These are now based on treating more like the symptoms and reducing the inflammation. But we are now also doing a new project because from the last years we learned that the microbiota from the intestinal microbiota play an important role in these diseases.
What is the microbiota, Kathleen?
The microbiota, these are like small microorganisms living in the gut. These are bacteria, viruses, yeasts, and they are there in the gut because of your health. They digest food, make vitamins, and they're important for people. But in patients with IBD, we see that the microbiota in these patients is that there is an imbalance between the beneficial and the harmful bacteria. And we know this from recent studies. And what we are now trying to do in a project is to manipulate the microbiota to restore, we call this dysbiotic, this imbalance, to restore this dysbiotic microbiota by using different strategies, and we hope that we can then find a new treatment for the patients and hopefully in the future also a cure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kathleen. Maybe we can touch upon a first topic, which is the notion of creativity. We always say that artists are the creative players in our world, which is definitely true, but creativity is, of course, not limited to the arts. I think if you are a lawyer or a doctor or a researcher, you need also different forms of creativity. So, Jean-Christophe, how do you get your sparkles in your research?
That's an interesting question. So, well, from all sources, from many different sources, obviously science is a slow process. So we are inspired by our colleagues. We exchange a lot. We sometimes argue, but that helps to go to the ask the next question. Then. One of the things that I've realized over the last few years is that science and research is something that you need to be very passionate about, and it's very demanding, and we spend a lot of time and energy thinking about the problem that we decide to work on. And we have a tendency to focus too much maybe and not just take some distance and look at the big picture. And I think that, for example, events such like this one is something that could be inspiring, and simply the fact of trying to explain to a public, general audience what we do is helpful. I think I have been inspired by some artists, as you said. I'm interested in modern art.
Can you give some examples?
It's often something that relates to color, to beauty, and we take a lot of images in our lab. Some of those you've seen, they're pretty colorful. And seeing how some artists depict, nature in different ways is inspiring. One of the disciplines, and you're talking about creativity in science, is also about developing new methodologies and techniques to tackle the same problem. Mm-hmm. In fact, we have seen this a lot lately. There's a huge evolutions in technologies, and this comes from often very creative minds, engineers that think about how to overcome some limitations. So science is full of creative people,
Absolutely. Kwang Yi, you have been working already with different research institutions. Can you explain a little bit how you collaborate? Because art-science collaboration is, of course, not only the visualization of research or only the communication of research. We truly believe that artists, the way they work, can also inspire the way or the methodologies of research are being influenced. So, Kwang Yi, you have some experience in this.
I think it's very interesting because every different collaboration between me and the scientists are totally different. But for example, sometimes they are more like the technical team provide the technique, but sometimes they are also the creator, just like the artist. They work with me and we co-create an art project. So, but it's not right and wrong. It's more like each of the different collaboration has its own value, and it's totally different. And I think from my perspective, it's very important to engage art and science together, because contemporary art has this criticality. It's not only talk about the aesthetic or the beauty of the art, but more like how to use art as a tool to reflect the problem or the social issue in our contemporary society. And I think this criticality is very important for science itself, because of course, being a scientific researcher, you have to have creativity to do your science work. But sometimes when I was a scientific researcher, I see the limitation in science world, because there's the regulation you have to follow, you have to obey. But art allow me to break the rule, to challenge the system of the science. I can be very crazy. I can be very free to imagine what I want to imagine. And I think that's the most important thing for me to do the art science collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To break the systems, to indeed. And there was, of course, already an interesting interaction between Sandra and Kathleen. So Sandra is really, from her artistic practice, specializing in energetic practices and alternative medicines, which is, of course, relatively very controversial in the scientific world. Can you say something more about your take on this energetic practices?
Yeah. I received this heritage from my grandmother, who was a medium. So it's very familiar for me, because it's not a belief, it's a knowledge. I know that it's a bit strange to say that it's a knowledge, but it's not very important, I think. We have to change our minding of thinking this kind of category. It's perhaps just practice, you know. When you practice science, I practice arts, and you can practice the energetic. And for example, when I work on a project, I can use I don't know, a labradorite. It's a stone. Malachite, or I don't know, obsidian, and all this stone has specific qualities that influence me in different way, and I can use it for make a drawing, for create stories, or for me, for my health. So I would like to open this way in the collaboration with the scientists. I don't think it's important to ask if it exists or not. We have to let. It's not important, this question, this binaries question, right or wrong. I think the question is what kind of practice make us in movement. I was talking about expression. Perhaps a cancer cell, has a type of expression. I don't know if you can say that in scientist practices, but perhaps if there is an expression, perhaps we can measure the vibration of the expression. So I would like to test that. And we know, for example, in hospital, there is alternative therapies who helps patients to fight against the cancer. For example, sophrology, meditation, Qigong, Tai Chi, etc., etc., all energetic approaches. So you have people who works on subtle bodies, that's the expression, because we have one physical bodies and several bodies who are invisible. So in my art, I try to democratize the relationship between the kind of bodies. Yeah.
Okay,
And
thank you, Sandra, for this more detailed explication of these alternative practices. And I was wondering, with two hardcore scientists in a way here present, is there some openness of both of you towards this way of thinking? Maybe I start with Kathleen.
Well, we're now going into the direction of pseudoscience, which is not science. And I think as a scientist, I have to stress out that, yeah, belief is not science. And this is an entire different area that we are, as scientists, not really familiar with. And I think in science, one of the most important values is objectivity. And I think in these alternative therapies, like with the energy flow and stuff, this is more like a subjective thing. But yeah, I think, of course, it would be interesting for maybe to as a scientist also to look into that and try to make proof, because as long as something is not proven, it's not true. And but of course, it's really hard because it's so subjective to make proof of it. And I think this is what is holding scientists back from these alternative therapies.
Yeah, so I agree with what you said. We come from far. We believe on facts, so we need to see, and only believe what we see and what we measure. And so now, of course, some of those are very ancient beliefs that may have some interesting aspect to it, meaning that there may be some biological processes behind some of the beliefs. So, for example, you were talking about microbiota, for example. There is very important studies lately showing that the composition of a microbiota can influence response to specific therapies, and these are very serious scientific results. And I would be more keen to think about these alternative way of thinking. Linking this back to real biology, and maybe something it would be interesting to explore there.
Thanks, I have a consideration, but first I would like to hear Kwang Yi. What's your take on such practices?
I think maybe one of my previous work could be an example, because I did some project regarding Chinese medicine, and one of them is tiger penis project. And because in Chinese medicine, some of the medication are from animals' organ, and people believe in eating this kind of animal organ is good for our health. And however, it's kind of not science. Maybe it's more like cultural belief system. However, it's causing problem because a lot of animals are endangered. And my project is trying to use biotechnology like genetic modification, tissue culture, and 3D bioprinting to artificially design a hybrid penis, which is stronger, culturally stronger than tiger penis, to replace the culture of eating tiger. So in this case, use biotechnology to design, to create artificial food or medication serve for Chinese medicine, but at the same time protect the endangered species. I mean, in this case, I think this kind of alternative therapy or alternative medicine, I think it does have the cultural value in the history, and I think we don't want to get rid of all of it. But of course, it has their own problem. But it's not that binary, like choose science or culture, more like how to find a harmony or balance between both of them. So my works kind of combine biotechnology and the traditional culture of medicine in Asia, and try to propose a new innovation, art, whatever you call it. It's something new, and I think it could be a way to solve this complex problem which involve the cultural issue, but it also can have the benefit to science. Yeah, so I think this kind of combination is quite interesting.
Absolutely. I think also that the collaboration between artists and scientists is bringing art thinking within the research practice. I think artists deal with intuition, they deal with some sorts of beliefs, they try to define also the invisible as scientists do. Now I was wondering, because if we look at the challenges we are confronted with today, it's to communicate a narrative towards the public, a narrative of change. We have to repair the future. And this is why we also established Studiotopia, is to bring scientists and artists and many other people together to reflect on how we can reimagine the future. Now I was wondering to both of you artists, if we have to write an alternative narrative, or can you define what for you are the main challenges we have today and how we could maybe solve them? And I think believing in something is very important towards the broader public, because we have also seen that they don't necessarily believe in facts. It's very hard to make people believe climate change because they don't care about the facts. So how do both of you see this? How we can repair the future?
Wow. And I guess, so the question does not relate to our work in particular, or cancer biology in particular. It's just to...
yes, the world vision, the world view, how would you like to see changes happening?
Yeah, I think as scientists, as we discussed already, we base our thinking and on facts, right? So indeed, we have seen lately that there is a trend and movements of people that kind of ignore facts, and which is a scary thing to me, I have to admit. And I hope that we can go back to a situation where people are more interested into facts than into beliefs or yeah, maybe you can follow up and maybe
is there only facts? Or do you need only facts to be alive, Kathleen? It's a question.
To be alive, well, I'm still thinking in as a scientist. So and then I agree with Chris that facts. Yeah, we are based on facts and less on what we believe. But yeah, it's a difficult.
Do you
question.
think that philosophically that there's many things that have been changing in the course of time, like Renaissance, they put the human in the center of the universe. Then we went to post-humanism, where like the agency of people is really less or considered less important than in the times of Renaissance and even modernism. And from your study and your experience of the gut, I mean, does it also mean that it's not everything we think is just our thinking? You know, we are also this other environmental bacteria. Is this true? Does the gut really influence us? And
Yes, we are, but we are still in the early stage of finding out what is this, what are all those bacteria in us doing, and you have to know in our gut, we as humans, there are like 10 times more bacteria than bacterial cells than human cells. So we can start thinking, are we human or are we living bacteria? And I think this is maybe a new philosophy, and that we also have to see like that our microbiome is actually like a second organ. And there's it's new findings in science. But recently, the group of Jeroen Raas, they found, for instance, an association between the microbiota, the gut microbiota, and depression. So this means that there might be some communication with the bacteria in the gut and the brain, and they might influence the way we are feeling. So I think this is a very new and interesting finding, and but of course it's still in the very, very early stages, and this needs further research and further studies. Yeah.
Kwang Yi,
Yeah, I think this kind of new research kind of have an influence on the definition of human, just like what you mentioned. Like, if we coexist with the bacteria, are we human? Or, for example, like if I change my microbiota because of my disease, because I want to be treated, and I change it by the treatment, and after the treatment, am I still me? So these kind of things make me rethink, like science is, of course, it's about fact, it's about objectivity, but sometimes the result or the outcome from the scientific research, it might cause the philosophical issue or maybe other ethical or cultural issue. Not only definition of ourselves, but also sometimes our relationship with the natural environment or the whole society.
Sandra?
Yeah, perhaps it's a question of point of view and how to change about point of view of worlds and the relationship between the different species. Perhaps I need to know that there is a microbe, a bacteria inside me, which who work with me, and the knowledge, the science knowledge, could help us to enlarge, to increase our meaning of representation. But also there is the problem of representation, because all the domains, all the big domains of knowledge create a type of representation and imaginaries. For example, I don't want to choose the transhumanism representation, you know. I don't think the science is the answer for the future. It's a big part of, but it's not only the answer. As the technological progress, the question of the progress, we have to change our mind about it. Do you need progress? I'm not sure. I think art here are the good way to change the point of view of this kind of imaginaries that we don't really know. They are in work, and sometimes against us. Yeah, I think it's a battle. It's kind of battle. We have to choose a camp. Do you want to follow the transhumanism project, or do you want to, I don't know, to accept that we will die, but
that we will be. Sorry.
We will die, you know. So, but in this time, we can make things to accept all the bodies and to go to see microbes and yeah.
Jean-Christophe, I was wondering what you think about this.
Yeah, so again, we come from very different worlds, and you raised a very interesting question that I still need to think about. Whether or not we need progress, whether we need technologies. My entire work and life is based on using these new technologies and trying to solve health problems with those technologies. So we would need to discuss this.
But you
further.
do,
Yes,
you do
that's
believe
good.
that if we go into this system and bacteria and how nature creates that, there must be some sort of force. At least I would need to think about this force, about something I can't define, in order to stay alive. Sometimes both of you also have existential doubts, I think, and is science enough then to be happy in life? That's maybe a very naive question, but I mean, awful things happen to us.
Yes, yes, yes. Being a scientist is hard because we try to solve problems and we try to understand everything with facts, and we try to measure, and that's maybe where things become different there. So if we try to explain an observation, we will go back to measuring facts, and we only reason in this way. At least we are trained for reasoning in this way, and so that's how this maybe interaction could be very interesting for us. Is how we could come in between and thinking about ways to take some distance from that.
But there's one of the persons from that are following us online asks us is how do we communicate science towards the larger public? How do we make them sensitive for what the science world is doing? Do you feel that, Kathleen, for example, people understand your research, or do you need the people to understand your research, and why?
Well, I think science is very important, or has also a very important impact on society. And I think it's important that the general public is informed about the research that we are doing. And for us scientists, we are used to communicate with other experts in the field. So we go to conferences and there we discuss our research with other scientists, but we don't very often discuss with the general public, or also, it's also important that the general public knows what we are doing. And for me, I'm working on inflammatory bowel diseases, and I still often, when people ask me, what are you doing, what is your work, and I mention this disease, I often get the question, what's this disease? But it's like there's almost like 1% of in the Western world, almost 1% of the people that have inflammatory bowel disease. But still, it's not a very known disease. Whereas, for instance, everybody knows cancer, everybody knows AIDS, and I think. For the disease we are working on, I think it would be very interesting that we also can reach out to the general public, inform them about this disease and what it is, and also the research that we are doing.
Kwang Yi, how could you function as or to make more connections between scientists, artists, and the public? What sort of strategies do you have in place?
I think from my personal perspective, no matter what I'm doing in science or arts, for me, communicating with general public is very important for myself, because I think, especially just like what I mentioned, sometimes I present my project of art science collaboration to the public, and I receive lots of different reaction and feedback from the public, and these feedbacks are the new inspiration for my next project, and sometimes it's also new inspiration for a lot of scientists that I'm collaborating with. For example, I did a project about how to use dentistry to design sex toy, and it's quite provocative because you do a sex project with a dentist and medical doctor, and it sounds very weird things. But after I present my project and I got some feedback from dental health people, because my design and my art also has the function for preventing HPV infection during oral sex. So it's also has the connection and the value to the science person as well. But without this collaboration, we cannot come up with a new idea or new inspiration. Because of the collaboration, we bring crazy or creative things with scientists and dentists, and we do together, and then we can have the outcome. So I think, and also we present it to the public, and we found out that each of the public and each of the person have different idea of the sex toy. So after the presentation, we find out that our design is too subjective. So we need to co-design with the public, and then we have the next step of this project. So communicating with the public also has the certain value for myself and also for scientists.
Jean-Christophe, you told me that an immunotherapy is, of course, something people are very scared of, because the public for you is also the patients, of course. I think artists can be really useful into communicating between scientists and the patients. How would both of you collaborate, for example, and what would be the need for you in your relation with patients?
In terms of communication, so we do a lot. So we try to explain what we do through different medias, different channels. And we reach out to patients. So our work is connected to patients. Obviously, we do cancer research, so we get samples from the patients to the lab, so we have a lot of interactions with pathologists and clinicians who are in direct contact with the patients. So there are different channels. What I still think we would need to do a bit more is indeed to not simply explain what we do and the main results, but maybe the consequences and to be a bit more educative in terms of the ins and outs of our research and the potential consequences, and maybe some specific behaviors that patients should adopt.
Do you agree with this, Sandra, Kwang Yi, that it's a more educative role, patients
I think
instructing about the consequences of the...
I think sometimes I see some art science project. It's not only because most of the science communication project is more like use a special way to teach or educate general public to understand the science project. However, some of the project of art science collaboration, they have ability to invite people to think the controversy of the science project. So the position of the general public in this kind of work not only receive the output from science communication, more like join to rethink, to co-think.
Yeah, so maybe something that is indeed maybe lacking from our side, not from the clinical perspective, but from our side in the lab, is that we don't have direct contact with patients, and we sometimes lack this feedback. Clinicians do have this contact. I have the impression that, and that may be a wrong impression, that it goes from the lab to the clinicians to the patients, and there is still maybe not as much, let's say, information flowing the other way around, if you see what I mean.
Interesting. Sandra, you have...
I think, yeah, it would be great that a patient could see her cell. Yeah.
Yeah. So before the interview, we were chatting about that, and so she had a very interesting idea, which is that we take samples from the patient. There's often a nurse or someone doing this, and bring the samples to the lab. I don't think that the patients really know what we do with the samples, and they never have a chance to actually look at their own cells and their own tissue. And she was proposing that we could invite some patients to look at their own tissue, their own cells under the microscope, and that might be something.
And to talk with it, for example.
Interesting. Maybe let's go to, it's an easier question that we have online, and it's a question about how this relationship between science and art can be incorporated in education, for example, at university or in schools. How would you see this, Kwang Yi? How could we communicate, for example, microbiology or cancer research through arts in education?
I think because recently I'm writing an article about how high school teacher teach students about art science collaboration. I found it's very interesting because mostly we do this kind of project only in university level, and we collaborate with scientists. And also I teach bio-art in art school, but they are all college students. So at this time, when I interview a teacher in high school in the Netherlands, and they think this is very valuable for them to teach kids in high school and middle school how to do a thing without the disciplinary boundary. So they, as an art teacher, they collaborate with a math teacher, biology teacher, and they co-design the program for the kids. And so within the educational program, they are not separated to math, biology, or art. So they more like do an assignment, but with multiple methodology. And I think it's very interesting. And when I see some teacher have already started to do this kind of education in high school, I think it's very important.
Jean-Christophe, are you involved in education from the world of science? Do you take this responsibility as researchers?
Yes, so we do to some extent. We get a lot of help from people from VIB, from our institution, to do that. We invite every year young kids to our labs. We have different initiatives. So we have a numbers of initiatives around this team. But the previous question was interesting, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are here is that maybe indeed art could be another way, a very creative way, innovative way of explaining what we do to a more general public through art. And I think that's something that could potentially be very interesting and reach out a broad audience.
Yes, sure. And also, as somebody online said, these art-science collaborations, they could connect very well, but then they have to go to the really deep questions that unite artists and scientists.
And the question, that very critical question, and to where we are not agree, actually.
So what, Sandra, is the question that you want to tackle after your first visits at the VEB in Ghent? So you met already a couple of researchers. Where would you research going to, or what do you expect from this collaboration?
I expect to have the possibility to create simple protocols to put things in correlation. For example, I'm repeat, but I really want to. I imagine that a patient can talk with their cell, with a cancer cell. I think it's very important that a patient who have a cancer ask to their cell why. I don't know or what he wants, but just to organize a platform of expression and collaboration. Is very simple, actually. After the philosophical issues, asking, and the artistic ways, it come after. This is my job.
Is this possible, Jean-Christophe? Make people interact with cells or communicate with cells?
Well, yes, it's possible. We work on this melanoma, so it's a form of skin cancer. So these are lesions that are visible, and so we could potentially image the lesions live. So we have different imaging systems that allow us to look at the tissue live, and the patient could see deep down the lesions and possibly talk to the cells. Why not?
Or with the bacteria?
Just to add, but perhaps to ask the good question, we have to change our behaviors, you know. The artist not to have on their studio, the scientist not always to be in the lab. We have to, to shake all the things.
And do you have the time for that, Kathleen, in the lab to do that sorts of experiments? And also, what will your colleagues
Always
say?
a question of energy.
The time, we always lack time. And it's also when we are doing research and we find an answer, then I still getting more questions. So each answer leads to new questions. So we never actually have time enough to do what we want to do. So you have to go for the things that you think that are that matter the most, and also there can be some risk, but the things that you think that can make the biggest changes, the most challenging topics. And of course, this is a very challenging one, but this is also, I think, a very difficult one to prove.
But don't you think that sort of strategies of Sandra going into the lab, trying to find things, communicate with cells or with bacteria, that it could lead to other approaches or maybe innovation that you would otherwise not have thought of?
Yeah, but if we are talking about the microbiota, there is already a crosstalk between the host, the human, and the microbiota. There's continuous talking to each other. The microbiota, they produce metabolites and the host, the human, is responding to this. And I think maybe this is also, of course, in the opposite direction, so that we are talking also to the bacteria. So in this way, if you look at it in that point of view, I think for sure it's possible. Yeah.
Jean-Christophe, would it help your research?
I'm not sure. It would maybe help us to think about ways, for example, to look at cells in a different way. But it's certainly something that could be interesting to pursue.
And you would have the time for that?
Time is indeed an issue. As I said, we scientists very passionate about what we do and very focused and work very hard. But no, we could make time for such an interesting project. I think we should.
We have a very interesting question here, and it goes towards our, of course, we're not only living in Europe, but there's also research and arts in many different countries. And what about our public and less developed countries? So this goes even further than what we are discussing here. How can we also, for example, people in Asia or Africa or less developed countries, it's even hard to comprehend there the very basic technology. Should we not be more responsible to engage them in our research? This is, of course, something where arts could help also. Kwang Yi.
I think within in different region or different area, they have their own culture. And when it comes to art science collaboration, I think they also have their own style, and it's not that impossible to do art science collaboration in non-Western world, because as I know, in some of the area, like in Asia, there a lot of artists also collaborate with scientists, but sometimes the topic will be a bit different from what I experienced in Western Europe, for example. Like I was visiting Indonesia in 2014, and it's called Bacteria Lab, this activity, and I saw the local artists use technology and creatively to solve some local environmental issue, like the volcano, the forest, the river, they have a bit this kind of pollution or these kind of things in the river. So they use DIY biology to extract the water from the river and to use this way to examine the microorganism in the water. And because these artists, they have this idea of DIY biology or bioart, these kind of things, you can creatively use biology to interact with your environment, your society. So they have the opportunity to solve their local problem. So I think art science collaboration is not a privilege for a developed country. It's also very important for non-Western world to have the opportunity to explore other possibility. But of course, in different regions, they have their own culture. So the outcome of the art science collaboration sometimes is quite different. Yeah.
Have you been outside Europe, Sandra? Going to
Proche-Orient, many times in Proche-Orient, in Lebanon, Palestine, and in Asia too, in Vietnam and Japan. I'm very interested about the Oriental meaning, thinking, especially Japanese and Chinese, the philosophy, traditional Chinese and Japanese. So, but I don't really know the approach, the scientific approach in these countries. So I'm very interested to discover that, because I can imagine it's very different than the Europe. So it will be great to work perhaps with Taipei.
I think, by the way, recently in China or Japan or Korea, in some of the Asian countries, they also have the leading science institution, and they have the most advanced technology as well. And they when they are doing this kind of new improvement of technology and science, sometimes it raises another layer of ethical question, because in Asia we have different religious system compared to Western country, so we have different kind of ethical issue. So sometimes maybe when we don't see it as is a problem, but maybe from Western perspective it's a problem, because you have the Christianity or something like that, but in some of the countries they don't have this religion. So the standard of ethical issue or the standard of the culture issue will be diverse in the globe. So to compare or to research the differences between different countries of doing art science collaboration, I think is very crucial, very important.
So it needs a lot of preparation also with regards to the cultural context in which you implement. That's of course a big challenge. Also, Kwang Yi, you were mentioning the fact of do-it-yourself biology, creating systems that people can easily use and learn, young people in less developed countries. Then I wonder, is the responsibility from the research world in Belgium or maybe in Europe towards the third countries? Is there a lot of investment? Because of course already the research is hard to get funded for your own research. Where is then the generosity towards the less developed countries? Is this realistic?
Realistic. So I think I cannot agree more that we should definitely explore areas and means through which we could disseminate science, technologies, and to all countries, including countries of world. But in a way, science is universal. The way we do science is universal. Obviously, problems are very different in other countries. We're focusing on different diseases. They have different problems to tackle. But realistic, I don't know. But I think we should try to make an effort. I'm not too sure yet how, but definitely it's something we should do.
Kathleen, at the university in Leuven, is there a policy for this?
Well, I'm not really aware of that, but at least this for the labs that don't have a lot of budgets. It's of course also very difficult to compete with other scientific labs where they have a lot of funding. And I don't know exactly how. It's something that we maybe should look into, yes, because it doesn't necessarily mean that research can also, it doesn't have to be always expensive. You can also do research with limited budget, which is also good.
Absolutely. So I think our answer for our share here in Brussels is that it's not very elaborated, our responsibility towards less developed countries. We can work on it based on the cultural values that we have to take into account. And then I would like to finish maybe with one last question that is from another person. How can art-science collaboration help influence political decisions about research funding? So it's very hard for the artists as well as the cultural world as well as the science world towards funding. How much time do you, for example, invest in funding, Jean-Christophe?
We've spent a lot of time trying to get funding. We write grants every other week almost. Indeed, funding is an issue. I guess it's true in many walks of life, let's say. But for research, we're talking about innovative technologies, and research costs more and more every day because of these innovations and these technologies. So we can do more, but it costs more, and so clearly funding is an issue.
It's an issue. That this is okay, Jean-Christophe?
Yes.
It's good to know. I thought it came from Kwang Yi. Did your projects help former research institutions to obtain funding because they were in the public, or?
I think mostly this kind of project that I did still rely on cultural funding. It's not that easy to have support from a science field at this moment, but I think it might be possible to have resources from science communication, even though I think our science collaboration is not typical science communication, but I think there is a kind of small connection with each other, and it's possible. I think it's possibly to convince the jury of science people to fund it. It's just my guess.
Yes, because of course there's a lot of investment as well in the cultural sector as in the Flemish Institute for Biotechnology, and I think when people more understand what you are doing, they will be more generous, because of course the politicians need to know what happens in an institution in order to responsibilize or sensitize people to fund. But how would we do that then to reach a large project out of our collaboration, Kathleen?
How artists can help us?
Yes, or how with the four of you, how could you create something that then reaches a larger public?
To start with, I think we scientists that we use a scientific language to tell what we've done, that by publications in scientific journals and like this. But I think maybe the artists can help, because I think there's still a big gap to translate this to the general public, and because I think the science language for the general public is quite boring and difficult to understand. And I think in this way maybe the artist can help us also to explain this to the general public and to make this outreach, and this might also help then, of course, to reach out to the decision makers in the end.
Sandra, you have some experience?
Yes, I think the artists have the responsibilities to choose to be creative and to be generous in their project. Not to be in a vocabulary, a mysterious vocabulary, very art contemporain. But yeah.
I think it's a good conclusion. It's also what you do in your work, Kwang Yi. It's artists, they use materials to they materialize ideas, which makes ideas that you can communicate it with the larger public. And I think they also tackle questions that from the worlds of research are never being tackled. So they go more towards emotion of the public, and I think when you reach the emotion of the public, you generate positive feelings. And this is something that with the Center for Fine Arts, of course, we try to do with the BOZAR Lab. We make lots of exhibitions where we will show the results of the collaborations between the scientists and the researchers. And so we hope that our politicians will finally understand that culture and science are basic forms of our culture, and that we need to invest that they need to invest in it. I would like to close this session here. I thank you all for watching, and I hope we can invite you to our future Studiotopia exhibition here in the Center for Fine Arts. Thank you, Sandra, Jean-Christophe.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen, Kwang Yi.
Pleasure.
Thank you, all of you.